Excellency, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us here today.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a long time since I've been in a conference like this, so I'm excited to be part of today.
Well, it's great to have you with us. I'm going to do a little introduction, and I'm going to start with the good news. The EDB announced this week that foreign direct investment is at record levels, with a whopping $733 million pouring into the economy in 2017 across a variety of sectors, importantly as well ICT, which I think took 54% of that. GDP growth is robust at 3.5% for 2017, which most importantly was driven by growth of 4.7% in the non-oil sector. Bahrain continues to prove itself as a thriving business hub with a solid, well-capitalized banking sector and one of the most diversified economies in the GCC, with oil making up just 20% of contributions to GDP. On top of all this, while the deficit remains a problem, it has fallen over the last year. In fact, the IMF projected Bahrain would run an overall fiscal deficit of 12.2% of GDP in 2017, compared with a deficit of 17.8% in 2016. However, the negative side of the ledger, it also warned that reserves remained low, putting pressure on the dollar exchange rate peg, and that steps to reduce the deficit more quickly were, in the IMF's words, urgently needed. So, Your Excellency, could I open our interview by asking you what steps you are taking to reduce the deficit further and faster, but critically, also preserving growth?
Okay. First of all, our economy, the diversification process for our economy has started decades ago. Today, oil only accounts for 19% of our revenue. The challenging aspect is that it is 86% of our government revenues. We have managed to reduce that to 74% in 2017 of total revenue. So good work has happened. More good work needs to happen to diversify our revenue as a government so that we can afford to pay for different services. But our GDP is well diversified. Now the challenge for us is very clearly to continue to diversify our revenue base but maintain growth in the economy. As you said, we have good growth, low unemployment, inflation is low, so the economy is functioning well. As we transition to other sources of revenue, we've got to make sure that these sources of revenue actually continue to keep the economy growing. We have introduced excise tax. I must say that it was done very well, and I thank the people concerned in Ministry of Finance and other ministries in the government, and actually the private sector that cooperated with us to make sure that it's a good exercise. It's 3 products, over 1,700 different brands, yes, to be actually priced in, and it happened fairly quickly and fairly efficiently. The next challenge. It is a challenge, but the next bigger challenge is VAT, which we are committed to implement within the agreement of the GCC, and that's a process that is also underway today. We are choosing the company that will help us put the law into final form and to introduce all the technical aspects of actually introducing VAT.
And do you have a date yet, firm date for when it might be coming in?
We will be working with our parliament on the law, and we are committed to have everything set up by year end 2018.
With VAT, just a quick question on that. It is obviously an extra source of income, but there are other consequences which people fear, perhaps maybe a slowdown in consumption. Is that something that you fear or have thought about?
We thought about it, but VAT for us is only 5%. So it's not a large number. It would be an issue if it's a larger number. But we have to also mention that we are signing free trade agreements with other countries where the 5% custom duty is being waived. So if you look at the numbers, it shouldn't affect growth. It's a smaller percentage. But what's more important, the revenue it generates to government revenue allows us to continue the social programs, allows us to continue the housing programs, allows us to continue the development programs. This government today is committed to building 25,000 homes. since independence, Bahrain built around 38,000 homes. So you could imagine the size of the projects that are being undertaken right now. And it is with the help of the GCC funds, but these funds are also helping us make sure that our economy is growing very well and is also able to handle the adjustment and revenue that we are undertaking.
But I mean, this is the question I have as well. I mean, it's this, how do you balance, obviously, your fiscal reforms with a political pressure for more welfare spending and the need to invest in, economic growth? How do you get that balance?
First of all, it's communication. And through Parliament and through direct communication, it's very important to understand we need sources of money to be able to spend it on the programs that will provide the support for different social programs and to make sure that we maintain the competitiveness and growth of our economy. So we have oil revenues. It's accounted for in the budget and goes to cover our recurrent expenditure. We have non-oil revenues that will help in our projects. And we have now excise and eventually VAT that will help support all our social programs. And what's important is that as these avenues expand, we are not only relying on more revenue. What I think is very important is the efficiency drive that we are undertaking. I always mention this to people who know me, but the simple fact of standards of insulation in buildings and standards for air conditioning and standards for lighting and LEDs and all of that will make consumption of electricity more efficient.
Yes.
A lot of things like that can happen where using technology, using efficiency, enhancing our competitiveness, our economy will do more with less. I always give the analogy of car engines today. They're faster, they use less fuel, and they're smaller engines. So it's things like that, using technology, using education, where people can actually live better lives and more efficiently.
And just to go back a little bit to as the IMF, as I quoted earlier, about the reserves and also about raising revenue, and we did talk briefly about your visit to international markets recently. It's sort of two-pronged question. Firstly, that was a successful deal. Could you give us an idea of why it was so successful? And also, comment perhaps, do you think the recent downgrades from S&P and Fitch, were they justified? And what's your view on those?
First of all, Bahrain has gone through challenges and has taken advantage of opportunities throughout the years. What's more important is, do we realize our challenges and do we see our opportunities? We do realize that today we have a dynamic growing economy. The challenge to us is to diversify government revenues, and we are doing that. Not in a panicked way, in a controlled way, in a logical way, and we are also increasing efficiency of our spend, which we think is very important. We are using the levers we have within our economy to continue to grow this economy even further. Solving our fiscal challenge involves expanding Bahrain's economy. It is something I think that's more available to smaller countries rather than larger countries. But when you grow your economy, you become more efficient because you can stabilize the size of the government services, but enhance the size of the economy. As more people use Bahrain for business, then more business will be developed, more efficiency will be developed. I think we communicate very well with world markets. We make sure they understand where we see our position, how we are dealing with our challenges, and we communicate what policies we are undertaking, maintaining, and it's very important, maintaining growth, maintaining low unemployment,
but that's
maintaining the sense that the citizen has to see that there is a future for themselves and for their children.
But you have such a difficult job in getting that balance of keeping that growth going while also keeping the doors open for international business, reacting to political pressure for welfare and subsidies. And on the subject of subsidies, they're still making up, I read 20% of the budget. Now, what are your plans around bringing those subsidies down?
The plans we have are the plans that we have implemented. Nothing new is being foreseen. There is a committee now dealing with a committee from the Parliament, looking at redirecting subsidies to the most who need it, but it is the same budget. We're not talking about a different budget. What's more important is we see our role as helping families who are in need, and even middle-income families, to make sure that they get the support they need in life to enhance their capacity to earn in the future. We all want to see people who are able to improve their lives and make a difference. I am at a unique position in my life where I have children that are joining the workforce, and I have parents that are aging and dealing with medical issues.
Yes.
I think dealing with medical issues is very important. The government's primary role is to make sure that when a citizen needs medical support, they get it and they get the best service they can. Because that's a time when everyone needs to make sure that they have support of the state. That to me is job one. On the other side, you would think you want your children to get jobs and become independent financially, hopefully at some stage. But more important, you want to make sure that the education that they're given is an education that allows them to achieve that. And I was recently in the investment summit in Riyadh, and the message that struck me was that education is no longer a phase in one's life. And that's very important. I hated school, and I thought I want to get rid of it. And then I discovered that all my life I was learning new things because I was having new jobs, new challenges. I can't use what I know when I was in charge of oil or when I was in charge of pensions or when I'm in charge of other things. I had to relearn different things. So to me, education is something that has to be constantly rethought. Now, I am from a generation that was taught about the pyramids in Egypt and Al-Qanatir al-Khairiyya. I've never been there, I don't know. But I didn't turn out too bad, I hope. But the thing is, today's children have Google and other similar programs to help them know what is what in the pyramids, and they can give you information that I don't remember now from what I learned.
Exactly, it's insane.
So they need to learn how to communicate, how to manage their lives. They need to learn other skills. As we reintroduce education, and it's a constant process of change, like we are changing financial services, education is also important. That, I think, is what is unique here for us in Bahrain, is we continue to quickly spot trends,
yes,
and adjust our laws and our system to pick up on those trends.
And I suppose skills, training people, you know, and the way technology is changing so quickly, as you say, it's a constant process. We are all still there. It's not just children, we are all. And leading in from that, you know, that helps form a dynamic business sector. And what forms the basis of a dynamic business sector are small and medium-sized enterprises. And what are you doing to boost the creation of small and medium-sized enterprises?
Whenever I go somewhere and somebody says I or we in a small group, it worries me. Because really, I'm old enough now to say that in a previous life, when I worked in institutions, we achieved success. I didn't do it because there was an I or a we, a small group. It's about setting the stage where access to finance, access to labor, access to land is available. And then maybe we in the government can say these are 3-4 sectors, but the landscape is open for every person with every idea.
Yeah.
And then the support mechanism can kick in to help them achieve the best that they could achieve in that sector that they're growing in. That's the challenge. It's creating an environment for a whole society to contribute, and the diversity you have in Bahrain, the diversity you have in the people of Bahrain, and their openness to the rest of the world, whether Bahraini or people who are working with us here in Bahrain, allows us the flexibility to be connected to ideas in the West, which has traditionally been our long-standing relationships, and the new emerging economies, bigger emerging economies in the East now that we had historically been linked to, but now I think this link can grow even further.
Well, I'd read there was a lot of investment coming from India and people talk a lot about what they call South-South trade between emerging economies. And is that something you're focused on as well, attracting support from those kinds of?
I think we're open for business to all countries, but definitely if you look at the Indian community in Bahrain, it's pretty large. Trade has been huge. Again, for a while, maybe all the countries looked west. These relationships are steady, these relationships are stable, but India is undergoing now huge growth, huge transformation. Other countries in the East are also experiencing that. There is potential to look at a huge circle around Bahrain and to say, where is the potential? We have to prepare the foundation, but we have to allow our business people, our companies, to actually look for opportunities, and we provide them support. I think you get much better, more balanced growth that way.
One of the major planks of diversification has been investment in infrastructure. The EDB reported recently the construction industry is not only boosting non-oil GDP, but also having a multiplier effect on other areas of the economy. I wonder, Your Excellency, if you just give us an idea of this multiplier effect and your plans for infrastructure. I think there's a $32 billion plan. I wonder if you could just elaborate a little on that and what you think it means for Bahrain.
Part of that plan is to go for our historically strong industries. Alba, our aluminium smelter, Babco, our refinery, and other major industries, and take these forward to make sure that they continue to be in the top quartile internationally in the quality of performance that they perform. That is very important. Make sure that whatever we produce in Bahrain is actually in top form. Second is infrastructure in roads, bridges.
And there's and the airport obviously is being upgraded.
The airport, of course, but also making sure that all this infrastructure allows business to grow, provides more access to different new parts of land, makes traffic easier, but also the investment in housing is huge. And when I mentioned the government is committed to building 25,000 homes in this 4 years, it's a major project. All these are projects that are being undertaken to make sure that the landscape in Bahrain is stronger. But on top of that, infrastructure is also today is in technology. Infrastructure and seeing Amazon Web Services being established here, and seeing our competitiveness and our standing and connectivity to the internet. Infrastructure is looking at our laws. I think laws are part of infrastructure. Are your laws competing with the best that is out there? When we look at payment systems.
Yeah, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. Yes.
Yeah. All these are systems that are quite important to make sure that we bench ourselves to best practice, global competitiveness indexes, and we see where we are different, and we prioritize what we believe is important.
And which we've talked about diversification. Which sector are you most excited about in terms of its potential for really, boosting Bahrain's obviously revenues, but its place in the world?
In business tourism, I believe there is a huge opportunity in healthcare, and I believe in education we can make a great difference because of the openness of our society and the competitiveness that we can create in the education process.
And do you see yourself in terms of, let's say, the education, this is a regional thing, or is it just a Bahraini thing? So do you see yourself sort of creating an educational system which will attract people from across the region, or is this purely about getting Bahraini skills?
First of all, competition in the Gulf has always helped us. Whenever there's competition, it actually works well because everybody's on their toes, which I think is a good thing. More important in education, I think it is education that gives you your primary education and then your more specialized education. And what I see we can do in Bahrain is we can create education systems that are more specialized and for Bahrainis, people living in Bahrain, but also for people around us in a bigger circle. We can say the GCC alone, or we can design a business circle around Bahrain that it doesn't conform to a political name and say within this region, people can come and study in Bahrain, or maybe even bigger.
Yeah.
We can create a place where ideas will be exchanged, technology will be taught, and we're able to create an environment where people will find learning and adding value as important. Now, when we talk about education, when we talk about economies, there is a tendency these days to focus on artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, because these are the new things.
All we talk about.
But we all need good chefs. We all need people who are fixing cars. I had an issue with a jet ski, and the guy came in with a laptop and connected it and actually fixed it through the laptop.
Through the laptop?
And it was amazing for me to see that happen. I thought mechanics were mechanics the old way. They're not today.
But actually, the point within that, though, is that maybe laptops are putting some mechanics out of business. There's an employment issue with all this technology, isn't there? That maybe there'll be fewer mechanics needed, and that's a problem for an economy.
When I was in the stock exchange as director, we introduced a system for brokers who I was told will never get through, but it was the similar system to the one being taught in New York, except for the tax element.
Mm.
And actually, a lot of them passed it, and I think it's still in practice today, but at the time, a lot of them did pass that test, and they studied for it. So people are incredible. Once you put a challenge, people will rise to it.
They will rise to it. You have faith in the human spirit.
And as long as it's a logical challenge, people will rise to it. And one thing about Bahrain is has been open for hundreds of years.
Mm.
So we live with people from many other countries, different cultures. We accept that, but we also accept new knowledge. And maybe because the size of Bahrain, we also like to travel. So we learn from other countries. So new things are not complicated to sell.
We talked briefly about the role of Bahrain before, and yesterday someone brought up, and we discussed this before, that the role of Bahrain had previously been misunderstood in the GCC. What do you see as the role of Bahrain within the region?
The role of Bahrain, I think, more importantly, first of all, is to work for us as a government to make sure that our citizens are prioritized in finding economic opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But then our role within our partners in the Gulf is to continue to push for better economy, a safer environment, and a more reliable lifestyle. One of the numbers that always worry me is when you look at countries where there are temporary jobs. People here still depend on the job and love the security of the job. And that's very important. The security of the job means the security of the family.
And confidence and business confidence.
And
as well.
making decisions to buy and to commit. It's very important for us and the government to continue to push for that. Innovation, yes. New sectors, yes. But there are historical sectors that are doing fine. Mm-hmm. We just got to make sure that they also get challenged, whether it's in the laws or whether it's in the way they are conducting themselves, to make sure that they are at the top of their game.
And are you happy with the progress that you've made in terms of that, but also in terms of obviously the deficit? And what more do you think, when you lie awake in bed at night, what do you think, what more can I do? What other things do you think could be done?
I am never satisfied.
Good place to be.
Because if you're satisfied, you should retire. I think every few years, what I do within the Ministry of Finance is we call in the IMF or somebody else and we benchmark ourselves to best practice. And then we find what's the next challenge. Mm-hmm. I remember I started working, which is for the young people here, is not very long ago, but it was the first introduction of computers in the workplace. Today, we have a committee in the ministry looking at artificial intelligence. What it would mean is it would latch on to our computer system and then take it to the next level. So the jobs we have in treasury, in budget, in other departments will be re-engineered to do more higher value things and leave the simpler tasks to artificial intelligence and our computers. Now, I think we always have to benchmark ourselves and try and see where the world is going. I've been lucky to represent Bahrain in the IMF and World Bank for a long time. We deal with the OECD, we deal with international organizations. And we make sure that whatever's happening there, we're talking about here. Because there is no room for us to be in a different world. We've got to be connected. We've got to understand what the G20 is thinking about. We've got to understand what best practice is, and then translate it into policies here.
And keeping those conversations going, because in difficult times as well, you need to be able to be having those conversations.
Because there is one language the world understands, which is the international language of business.
Yes.
And we've got to be connected. When business companies come to Bahrain, they don't want to learn a new accounting system. They don't want to learn a new business system. They don't want to learn rules and laws that are different from what is international best practice.
Yeah.
They want to come and feel they kind of have an idea what this country is all about, because it's based on what international language of business is.
We didn't discuss this before, but what are your thoughts on the rise of China and capitalizing on that, on their growth for Bahrain?
The growth in China is phenomenal. It's wonderful. When you look at the world today and you see the rate of growth that is happening around us, it's good to see the number of people that are coming out of poverty around the world. It's good to see that the world was committed. I sit on the development committee in the World Bank, and the work of that committee and other organizations around the world and multilateral organizations to support people coming out of being poor in many regions around the world. And I think the work that China has done has helped significantly grow China as a major power player in the world in business and industry. And I think the growth we see in different regions around the world is helping our economies become stronger. The more there are consumers, the more there are contributors to growth, the more I think we will see peace, prosperity, and it's good to travel around the world and to see people are actually being focused, and we are becoming truly a global village.
Truly, exactly. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I might wrap up firstly with a couple of questions. Firstly, what do you see as your major challenges for 2018, Your Excellency? And I want to frame this in the kind of, I suppose the biggest inhibitors to Bahrain's potential, what you, in terms of politics, social and economic. What's holding Bahrain back?
I think we have a system of consensus building, whether it's using our parliament, political system, and so on. And I think it's vital for Bahrain to go through that process. Some think when you see political debates that they are hindering, I see them as a positive. I take the government's budget to parliament and we debate it, and sometimes it takes 6 months and it's incredibly frustrating. But when it gets voted on, it represents the views of the majority, hopefully. I can never say everyone.
Yes, well that's what a parliament is. Yeah.
But that's what's important. Our challenge for me personally in the Ministry of Finance is to continue to diversify away from oil as a main revenue, but maintaining growth, maintaining competitiveness, maintaining quality of life for Bahrainis. I think as a country, we have to continue to find that today you hear so many new technologies in medicine, in IT, in all fields. We have got to embrace, we've got to understand, and we've got to implement all these changes so that we stay relevant. So the challenge for me is being relevant today and after 5 years.
Exactly.
I fight to be relevant personally because I look at my brother's son who's 4, who someone commented, he did not grow up in a world where there is program TV. He will be living in a world of on-demand TV.
Everything's on demand.
So on-demand TV is on-demand everything, on-demand government.
He can swipe before he's even talking.
Yeah. So basically, when you look at all these changes around us in the world, we can't just take what our generation brought in. We've got to understand, we've got to be connected with everything around us. That's a huge task. If you look at the history of the world, we've had innovations, but not at this pace,
Yes.
not at this level. And it is much more challenging now. And it is for all of us to continue to try and keep up as much as we can.
Excellent. Well, our time is up. So with that optimistic look into the future leads me to thank you very, very much, Your Excellency, for your insightful remarks. Really fascinating talk. And to ask everybody to give a warm round of applause
Yeah. Thank
to
you.
His
Thank you.
Excellency.
Thank you.